Dong Joo waits outside the palace gates to finish the killer of her family once and for all. However, as she prepares to see who the real killer was, the king walks out with his guards. The king was the killer of her family. Just then, a hysteric queen rushes out of the palace demanding to know if the rumor she had heard was true, and if the king really did abandon and try to kill their first child. The king stares his wife down and ignores her altogether as she wails and cries in front of the whole royal guard. Just as he is about to leave, his eyes fall upon Dong Joo and he marches towards her demanding to know what she was doing here. Dong Joo is so afraid that she cannot even speak a word as tears fall from her eyes. Fortunately, Nok Do arrives in time to save her from the king's wrath. As they are about to leave, Dong Joo's box is revealed and searched by the royal guard, but they only find sewing equipment inside the box and so allow the two to leave. Nok Do then takes Dong Joo aside and tells her not to do anything reckless as it might get her killed. The king then visits the prison where he has Seo Yoon held captive for a long time now. The king tries to torture him and threatens him to reveal the location of Nok Do, but ends up overexerting himself and falls down tired. He is immediately rushed back to his chambers and later Nok Do goes to check up on his real father, the king. The doctor appreciates the fact that a normal soldier took such interest in the king's health and tells him that the king was doing fine. He had just overexerted himself. The next day, Dong Joo meets up with the prince, Nungyang, to tell him that she had failed to do the task. The prince is not pleased with Dong Joo taking so much risk and tells her not to do anything until next month, as by then everything will fall in place automatically. Upon hearing this, Dong Joo tells him that whatever he does he shouldn't mix Nok Do into his plans as he had nothing to do with their revenge. The prince gets frustrated and commands her to do as she is told and leaves. Later, Kim S-suk meets up with Nungyang to once again make certain that he will be supporting the Mual Corps after the revolt and the overthrowing of the king. The prince assures her that his word will not be broken, but Kim insists on seeing some written proof of his promise. Kim is actually working with Nok Do to bring down the revolt from within and help the king maintain order in his kingdom. If they could get the proof, they could stop Nungyang from doing whatever he was planning to do. Nungyang is reluctant at first but then shows her the book that had the signature of all the lords involved in the revolt planning. This book was placed in the prince's compound at all times inside a special locker in his room. The key to this locker was carried by him around his hat at all times. Kim reports this to Nok Do, who now has to formulate a plan to get the key from Nungyang. Firstly, he goes to his master and tells him that he was the crown prince and the actual heir to the throne. At first, the man doesn't believe it, but then Nok Do had never really lied in his life, and so he is forced to believe it. Nok Do then tells the man to help him save his father's kingdom. Nok Do manages to get hold of some fermented cheese and gets the idea for the perfect plan. The next day, Nok Do and Dong Joo head to the palace for their work and notice that the queen is once again hysteric. This time around she had lost her pendant and was searching for it, even threatening the king that she would kill him if she didn't find it. She notices Dong Joo and assigns her the daunting task of finding a little pendant in the huge royal palace gardens. Just then she notices Nok Do with a similar pendant and asks him about it, but Nok Do dismisses the topic, telling her that it was a pendant given to him by his mother. While the prince is having a meeting with all of the lords who have decided to join him, they discuss how they could bring the king's image among the people down even further. Nungyang tells them that there was already the fact that he tried to kill his own son to take the throne. This was enough to make the king's reputation crumble. After the meeting, Nungyang goes to a local restaurant to have some ale. There, Nok Do's master is also present and starts making a scene once the prince is alone. He fights with his fellow men and accidentally throws some ale on the prince on purpose. Kim takes her master aside to a room to get changed and takes this opportunity to use the fermented cheese that Nok Do had given her to make an imprint of the key to the locker. That night, as Nungyang heads out to capture Nok Do and his family so that they could be used to threaten Nok Do into doing as he commanded, Nok Do uses the opportunity to head to the prince's residence and steals the book from the locker. He tears Kim's name from the book and quickly rushes back to the palace to seek an audience with the king, hoping to reveal all of the traitors in his palace. Dong Joo goes looking for Nok Do and finds Nungyang outside. He had just returned after he had failed to find Nok Do or his so-called parents anywhere. Dong Joo once again confronts the prince about not involving Nok Do in their business, as she was in love with Nok Do and didn't want him to get hurt. Angered after hearing that Dong Joo had feelings for Nok Do, he tells her the truth about Nok Do. Nungyang reveals that Nok Do was actually the son of the king, the very man who had slaughtered her entire family, and the same man that she wanted to kill to avenge their death. Dong Joo is shocked and more distraught after hearing the truth. Elsewhere, Nok Do finds that the king had actually gone to the prison, and he also enters hoping to give the king the book. However, as he enters, Nok Do realizes that the king had captured and was torturing Yoon. the man who Nok-du considered a father and had raised him ever since he was a child. The king had captured him not for treason, but because he had saved Nok-du from dying. The king had tried to kill his son when he was small because his son was the actual ruler of the throne and not him, and because Hyun had saved him it meant that his rule was under scrutiny. Nok-du hears his father's words and actions from afar and is heartbroken. He decides that he doesn't want to give the book to his father just yet, and leaves the cell without meeting the king. Back at his residence, Noongyang also realizes that the Book of All the Oaths was gone and is certain that Nok-du had taken it. Nok-du, on the other hand, is saddened by everything, and goes to meet Dong Joo to find solace in her company, not realizing that Dong Joo herself is troubled after finding out his true identity. Despite Dong Joo being troubled by all of the feelings that have been overwhelming her, she decides to not reveal the fact that she knew Nok-du's identity, perhaps hoping that he would tell her himself. After parting ways with Dong Joo, Nok-du goes to Noongyang, who is pleased that the book wasn't revealed to the king. Noongyang gives Nok-du the option to join him if he wants to after knowing the truth about his father. Nok-du denies it straight away, but Noongyang is certain he will be back and gives him 2 days to make up his mind. The king is growing restless with all that is happening in his life. A mad wife, and a live force against his throne. The rebellion, everything has him very troubled. Amid all of this chaos he finds Nok-du very sincere, and not realizing that Nok-du was his son. He promotes him as his royal guard and tasks him with the job of finding and killing the king's son. Nok-du, however, has only one thing in his mind. He wants to free Hyun from prison and so decides to make life even more troublesome for the king, his actual father. That night Nok-du goes around town spreading the word that the king had not only abandoned his son, but also tried to kill him. The news spreads like wildfire among the peasants, and soon this also reaches the courtroom. Upon hearing this, the king is so angry that he demands the person who spread the rumor be killed. However, Nok-du advises the king that if he reacted to the rumor, people would just think that it was true. He tells the king to ignore it, and perhaps even stop going to the prison for a while, as all the rumors started when he captured Yoon. The king reluctantly agrees. Nok-du then visits Yoon in prison and tells him that he would be freed soon enough. Yoon is not pleased to see him in the palace and advises him to run away, but Nok-du is adamant about freeing him and reveals his intentions of going against the king. While Yoon argues that the king was his birth father and Nok-du shouldn't betray him, Nok-du has already made up his mind. Later that day, when Dong Joo is around town doing her errands, she is pulled aside by an old homeless couple who take her to the location where they had buried her parents. Dong Joo cries in their memory and realizes that she had started to stray away from what she had initially planned to do. No one, not even Nok-du, should have come in her way of revenge. At the palace, the courtiers have gathered to convince the king to send their support to the Ming dynasty who had helped them during the Japanese invasion. However, the king believes that the Ming had never helped them in the war and were just leeches feeding off of his people. The courtiers are scorned at the king's ideologies, and one of them accidentally mentions that he expected nothing more of someone who killed his own son. The king gets furious and, despite Nok-du's earlier warning, proceeds to kill the courtier before everyone else. Nok-du is now more certain than ever that the king must be stopped. Nok-du then heads to the meeting between the prince and his accomplices and offers to join their cause on the condition that he is the one who kills his father and no one else, and the safety of the Mual Corps is ensured. He too then signs the book, swearing an oath to the revolt. He then meets up with Dong Joo, drunk, hoping to end things with her. Since he had chosen a dangerous path, he couldn't risk her suffering the consequences of his actions. However, when the moment arrives, he cannot tell her to leave him and instead tells her to stay with him no matter what. Unfortunately, Dong Joo breaks up with him instead for a similar reason. She had her own plans. Nok-du tries to convince her to stay, or at least explain the reason for her leaving, but she doesn't tell him anything specific other than not wanting to hurt him. Dong Joo had actually planned to assassinate the king and run away, and confided this to the old couple. The man, fearing that he would be executed, almost immediately tells her plans to the royal guards. Nok-du also hears this and starts searching for Dong Joo before she could be caught by the other authorities and killed on spot. He finds her finally in the middle of the street and realizes that she had found out about his past and his lineage. With tears in his eyes, he bid his final goodbye, allowing her to escape through the night. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and hit that like button to help our channel grow. Turn on the notifications so you won't miss any of our new videos. Thanks for watching.